How's it going, guys? It's Chucky here. Before the video starts, I just want to say that I apologise for the lack of uploads recently. I've had a bunch of stuff going on IRL regarding my school life and the virus, but to make up for it, I put a lot of effort into this video, including some new editing features and audio quality, so make sure to let me know what you think about that in the comments below. And secondly, I'd like to remind you that around 75% of you guys aren't subscribed, so make sure to do that so you never miss a video. But apart from that, make sure to like and enjoy the video. Over the last few weeks, I've been getting a bunch of comments and messages asking the same sorts of questions about OG names and accounts generally. I get people asking me everything from what are OG accounts to why do people want them. So I decided to put something together to answer any questions you might have. And in this video, I'm going to be covering all of the main information I think is necessary to know if you're going to be getting into the community yourself. I'm also going to let you know what many of the terms I use in my videos mean, and as always, in my longer videos, I'll be leaving the timestamps in the video description in case you want to skip through it like that. I'd also like to mention that I read all my comments, so if you have any extra questions that I don't answer here, you can always drop them there, as well as my Twitter DMs are always open and I respond relatively fast to what you've got to say. But without further ado, make sure to subscribe and enjoy the video. Now, one of the main questions that I see around the community generally is simply just what are OG names in the first place? Now, while this question is relatively simple, I want to go into a little more detail with it as it can go pretty deep. The simplest answer to this is that they are simply just a common word or character that most people will recognize. This can be anything from a common first name such as Mitch to a word such as tail. The next question is, what about words that aren't as common? Well, simply put, these are usually called semi-OG names. So for example, a word such as aftershocks is semi-OG, as it's not very commonly used. The line between whether a name is semi or not can be very thin though, and often depends on the person reviewing the name. Usually though, the best way to tell if a name is semi or not is to see if it either has a suffix or a prefix, such as un or ing. So surround would be OG, but surrounded is a semi. There's also often speculation around if certain accounts are OG because of trends and popular culture. For example, a username based on a song or album that recently came out, such as Eternal or Take, may get reactions over the first few days or weeks, but would quickly lose its status after a month or so. Finally, there are names that technically count as words, but are so uncommon that you can't even classify them as semi-OG. This is the case for names such as absquatulating or bibliopoles. While they are technically in the dictionary as words, they're incredibly rarely used. I like to call these dictionary accounts for obvious reasons. I'd also like to add here quickly that I've seen many people say that as OG stands for original, any name that hasn't been used before is OG. This is not true. Names such as LMFAO that have had multiple owners are still OG, but names such as 69 Big Chungus with no previous owners are not OG. OG names are rare for a reason. They're very difficult to find these days and they wouldn't be rare if they weren't. However, there are still a few ways to get one of your own if you're lucky. Most people hear my story about when I got Chucky and think it's as simple as just clicking the change name button at the right time, but this is not the case. It takes insane amounts of luck to do this, as you have to pray the bot snipers fail and then you need to be the other hand snipers. The other way to go about this is to use one of the bot snipers to do the job for you. There's many of these around, but the most known about and seemingly best is Cheerful Ninja. They sell snipes and accounts ranging from $5 to a few hundred depending on how OG the name is. There's also marketplace discords and websites that you can use to buy OG accounts, but this violates Mojang's EULA and can get your account locked. I also want to mention here that easily my most asked question is, why do some names say they're available on NameMC after they drop, but you can't claim them on Mojang? Now there is a fair degree of uncertainty around this, but it's fairly widely agreed that this has something to do with the bot snipers. Most of the names that this happens to are found to have been claimed by them, so it's likely they block names somehow and claim the name later on the account that the buyer provides. So, sadly, if you're hand sniping and this happens to a name, it's effectively already taken. Now obviously I mentioned that words and characters are OG, but what about other things? I've covered many of these in other videos, so make sure to check those out if you're interested, but I'll cover them in shorter detail as well here. Firstly, there are 2 character names. These are very obviously accounts with names that are only 2 characters long, such as VI or NU. These names could only be created years back in certain exploits in the early 2010s, before usernames could even be changed. Back then, people had no idea that these accounts were really worth anything, and so people were pretty careless with them when name changing was added, leading to the accounts becoming even rarer. There's also other names that can be classed as OG or semi that don't follow the same rules, such as repeater names or invalid names. Repeater names are names that have just one character over and over repeated in the name, and again, how you classify these is up to your own opinion, but obviously some are much more OG than others. For example, one of the rarest and my personal favourite is the 16 underscore account. And then there are invalid names. They're similar to 2 characters as they could only be made a few years ago in a few certain exploits. They're essentially names that have invalid characters in them, such as a space, a hashtag, or an accented letter. You very rarely come across these accounts on servers though, as most of the popular ones completely block these joining due to the issues that they cause. Many of you will know that Mojang gives out different capes to certain people, from the Minecon capes that they gave out to thousands of people, to special capes they only give to very few. Now, while many of these accounts don't exactly classify as OG per se, they still fall under the category of rare and valuable accounts. And again, similar to almost anything on this list, there are different tiers of rarity. Starting with the lowest, there are thousands of accounts that have just one 2016 Minecon cape on, redeemed a few years ago at the event in California, but from there, things build up quite fast. People ended up going to a few events and racking up 4 or 5 of these capes, becoming some of the most valuable accounts in the game very quickly. You may also know that Minecon capes were mostly applied via codes emailed to attendees, meaning that there are a few codes still lying around, but most are already used on accounts. People have also developed ways to hack and steal accounts from their OG owner, allowing buyers to use these accounts for whatever they'd like, whether it be either just using them or sniping an OG name onto the account, creating a cape OG. Then on top of this, there's all of the special capes that are given to certain people that Mojang thinks deserves them. Some examples of this are Realms mapmakers, big translators of the game, and even professional Cobalt players. There's less than 200 owners of all of these capes, so they've become incredibly rare and valuable in the community. There's even some examples of people mixing some of these capes with the 5 Minecon cape accounts, creating very rare 6 cape accounts. But as of right now, there's only 2 cases that's known about, not including staff accounts. And both of these use Cobalt capes purchased years ago from a professional player. And finally, there's the individual capes. As the name implies, they were given to just one person each for doing a particular thing that Mojang deemed worthy of giving out a special cape for. For example, Julian Clark managed to get Notch in touch with one of his childhood idols, and Akronman 1 was the 1 millionth person to buy the game. These are quite easily the most sought after cape accounts, as they are of course one of a kind. There's also a bunch of stories of these accounts getting hacked into and sold, but they really don't last that long without being either locked or returned to the owner. The OG Minecraft community has one of the biggest marketplaces in any game. It's littered with people selling everything from semi-OG names to accounts with special capes on them. Of course, many people know this, but one of the most asked questions I get is how much some of these accounts go for, so I thought I'd go into a little detail about this as well. Firstly, the cost of names varies greatly both from person to person and from name to name. Certain people would pay much more for any particular name depending on their preferences. A good example of this are Pokemon names. Some people are prepared to pay a few hundred for any old Pokemon name like Crabominable or Dwebble, whereas most people would view these as very low tier semis. This makes it incredibly hard to appraise many accounts, but there are general ranges. Semi-OG accounts usually go from anything like $15 to a couple hundred depending on how good the name is. Something such as Absquatulating would barely even hit the mark of 15, but Cats would be near the higher end. Regular OG accounts can range again from around $150 all the way up to a few thousand depending on a multitude of things, such as how secure the account is, the buyer, and of course the tier of the account. Examples of this will be something such as lenient on the lower end, to super common words such as cat or yes hitting the higher mark. I also mentioned earlier that there exist both Minecon cape codes and cape accounts. As you can't transfer Mojang capes to different accounts like you can Optifine capes, you're much more limited with accounts. This leads to the cape accounts going for much cheaper than the codes in most scenarios. The prices for cape codes are usually around $500 to $600 for 16s and 15s, but 12s and 13s are much rarer, so the price is incredibly unstable. 13s can go for anything above $1,000, but a recent one sold for around $1,500, and 12 codes go for easily above 1.5k as they're so hard to come by now. And as I said, cape accounts are much cheaper, but as the 2011 cape was applied directly at the event rather than via a code, it's the only way to get one of these anymore. By the way, the figures I'll be talking about here are for pre-name 100% secure accounts, and if you don't know what that means, stick around for a little longer and I'll explain it all. 2011 accounts are the most valuable at around $350. 12s go for around $300, 13s about $225, and then 15s and 16s again are much lower, going between $100 and $150, but people barely ever buy 2016 accounts as there's still a fairly large supply of the codes around. And beyond here, things get super complicated as you're getting into accounts that are very rarely on the market, but I will say that things like special capes that very rarely ever hit the market usually always go for about $1,000, and most of the time much more. Lastly, I do want to reiterate again that all of these things fluctuate heavily not only with buyers and other things, but also with time, with some accounts that used to go for around $3,000 now selling for over 10 grand. Now the final thing that I get asked about a lot is what certain words and terms that I use in my videos mean, so I thought I'd go a little into what some of the more asked about ones mean. For starters, I often use words such as cracked and jacked to describe certain accounts. These words are essentially just synonyms of hacked, and mean that someone has found the email and password to an account, changed the password, and stolen it from the OG owner. I also mentioned the word prename earlier in regards to cape accounts. A prename account mainly refers to a name that's only ever been used on one account that has 0 name changes, such as Y. It's also sometimes used in cases where a name has had previous accounts with it, but it's still an account with 0 name changes, such as Ask. But not many people actually view this as a prename account, just an account with 0 name changes. I also use the word locked a lot. This one confuses people slightly more, but it refers to when Mojang finds out that accounts have been sold around and then shuts down the account. It's very similar to having a Twitter account suspended, in that the account is unusable, but with the right resources, it can be appealed. Some of these resources include OGE and TID. OGE stands for original email, and of course refers to the email that an account was first created with. Oftentimes when an account changes hands, the new owner changes the email the account is assigned to, but this new email can't be used to appeal locks. TID is the transaction ID. It's a long string of characters that's sent in the confirmation email that you get when you buy an account. It's not intended for other people to have any of these pieces of information, so Mojang views anyone with this information as the original owner of an account. And finally, some people even get confused over what words such as snipe and transfer mean. Sniping is essentially as simple as waiting for the availability timer of a recently changed name to hit 0 on name MC. You then change your name on Mojang to whatever the name is. This can either be done with difficulty by hand called hand sniping or with a bot. Transferring is broadly similar, except it's basically always done by a sniper. If someone has a Cape account and an OG account, they often want to move the name to the Cape account, creating a Cape OG. This is done in the same way as regular snipes, it just details a slightly different situation. And if you see an incredibly OG name such as Yes or Dry dropping soon, it's usually going to be a transfer. There is a whole lot more that I can go into on all these topics, and I even have some videos on a couple of them already, so make sure to go and check those out if you're interested. I'm also going to be doing a few in the future, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any and comment what you want to see first. But apart from that, I really do hope you enjoyed the video. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.